July 18th. The backyard is crowded for a weekday evening. Even in the rain, hidden in the chaos is the element, waiting to strike like snakes. And I'm there too, watching, waiting, eating. They think I'm hiding in the shadows, but I am the shadows. 2 minutes of nightfall has made me come to grips with my inner thoughts, such as, am I too old to be wearing skinny jeans? Or, why can't I wait just a few more seconds for my Hot Pocket to cool down before I eat it? I mean, I know if I eat it now, then I'm going to incinerate the inside of my mouth, but I still do it. Every single time. I must choose my next YouTube video carefully. It's a big platform. I can't talk about everything. Thankfully, there are two things that keep me motivated in this cold, dark world. Justice and ranking all of the DCEU movies. And I'm all out of justice.
All right, so this list is pretty self-explanatory. I ended up doing all of this myself, so if I missed a TV show or if I missed a movie, then yeah, it's my fault. So you can blame me if I mess up. This is my first time putting together this big of a list by myself. So what I've got here is the bottom tier, which is horrible, 0 out of 10 would recommend. Then we've got the mediocre and forgettable, decent and watchable, pretty great, and this is cinema, which basically is my way of saying this is literally the best they have to offer. Just because I think that something's really good doesn't necessarily mean that it's one of the best movies I've seen, but when you compare the DC movies with each other, that's where I get my ranking from. And just to make sure I clarify, this does not include movies like Joker, The Batman, the Dark Knight series, because those are all in their own little pocket of DC's world. I am only ranking the DCEU movies, which are all interconnected in their own universe. So with that out of the way, let's go ahead and jump right into it. All right, looks like number one, we've got Justice League, and this looks like the 2017 version. I'm going to go ahead and just throw that right into my horrible 0 out of 10 would recommend. If you watched my video from about a month ago where I covered the downfall of DC, I did most of the talking in that where I was explaining how Justice League is basically a failed experiment where they wanted to be too much like Marvel. They threw in a whole bunch of little MCU quips. They brought in Joss Whedon to try to reinvigorate the brand while completely alienating Zack Snyder's vision for what he wanted Justice League to be. And that's really all that needs to be said about that. Moving on to the next one, we've got Batman versus Superman. And this looks like it's the original theatrical release. This is going to be kind of controversial, but I'm going to put this up in the decent and watchable. So critics panned this movie when it came out, and there was a lot of problems with the movie. I can't even lie. They were trying to force too much too quickly. But if we're going on just decent, again, that's why I made this quota, is because I feel like I could turn this movie on and still watch it and get some kind of enjoyment out of it. I'm not saying it's a great movie. In fact, there's a lot of holes with it. They tried to bring in Diana Prince as Wonder Woman, and I believe that they really just wanted a team-up movie, or I guess a Civil War version of DC where they wanted these two heroes to go up against each other. But I feel like you sacrificed a lot of Batman's arc. You sacrificed a lot of even Superman's arc. Even though Superman had his own movie, there's still so much more character development that you needed to do before you get into this movie. But the movie itself is pretty darn entertaining, if you ask me. Moving on to the next one. The Suicide Squad. Not Suicide Squad. This is the Suicide Squad. I am going to go ahead and go straight to This Is Cinema. I think this is one of the best movies that the DCEU has put out, bar none. This movie is a perfect blend of James Gunn's vision with an actually compelling story arc where they take a bunch of these misfit characters and basically make them work together and figure out their differences. And we've seen this happen 1,000 times in other movies, but James Gunn just really knows how to do character movies where he can take pre-established characters or even characters we didn't know about. I mean, Ratcatcher 2. Who the heck has heard of Ratcatcher 2 before this movie? And he turns them into these lovable characters that you go home from the cinema thinking, wow, I actually was rooting for this person. I keep saying James Gunn, but this is one of those few movies, both from DC and Marvel, where you have a director's vision and the studio just said, hey, go for it. We fully support you. And the reason why this movie did so well is because there was no studio interference, or little to none, and the director got to have his vision shine through. So for me, The Suicide Squad, this is cinema. Ooh, coming up next, we've got Wonder Woman 1984. To be honest, I don't have too much to say about this one. I'm taking this one straight into the mediocre and forgettable, because to me, this was not an enjoyable movie. This was one of those movies where you could probably see them sitting around in a think tank meeting trying to come up with an idea for the movie, and they're all like, all right, what are we gonna do for Wonder Woman? And one guy's like, 1980s. And the other guy's like, I like that. They never had a story in mind, but they just had a vision for what they wanted the aesthetic to look like, and it's a heavy nostalgia bait of 80s themes. I felt like the story with Cheetah was something that was very surface level and not fully developed. I believe that the writing was terrible. The CGI was just inexcusable for such a big blockbuster. And as much as I love Gal Gadot as Wonder Woman, I feel like in this one she seemed kind of bored. Like, she gets a lot of hate for just kind of seeming uninterested in a lot of her portrayals of Wonder Woman, but personally, I've never had a problem with her up until this movie where she seemed so lifeless. And everything about this movie, even though it had so much color, it had so much pop, it felt like it was overcompensating for a complete lack of direction. Granted, the main villain of the story, which is Pedro Pascal, absolutely hamming it up in his role. He was entertaining, at least, and it's one of those Nicolas Cage roles where the movie itself may not be good, but darn it if he's not bringing his all when he's there. Pedro Pascal is what at least makes this movie a step above the horrible would not recommend. Next, we've got Suicide Squad, and this was the OG Suicide Squad. I, to be honest, would put this in the horrible would not recommend. I, in good conscience, could not recommend anyone watching this movie. This movie had such an incredibly confusing story arc. I don't really know what David Ayer was thinking when they made this. There's a lot of rumors that, just like how they released the Snyder cut, there's a lot of petitions for David Ayer's cut of the Suicide Squad. And David Ayer has been openly honest about the fact that the studio cut a lot of his stuff out, and maybe that would save it, but for me, it takes a lot of imagination to think about how they could have saved this movie. This is literally just a team-up movie just to have a team-up movie. The whole main villain arc with Enchantress was, in my opinion, extremely boring, and the fact that we end the whole movie with another big battle with a blue sky beam is a perfect example of what's wrong in modern comic book movies, where you find a format and you don't try to make it better. Instead, you just try to kind of rest on the laurels of the movies that have come before. When I first went to see the movie, I didn't really hate it, but I also definitely didn't love it. But this movie, out of most of the other movies, did not hold up well with time. I watched it once and then I tried to watch it again, and it just was a bore the whole way through. All right, coming up next, we've got Aquaman. I think this came out in 2017. Aquaman was decent and watchable. Aquaman was just a sneeze away from being mediocre and forgettable, but I think that James Wan's artistic style with his direction helped save this movie. There were several scenes in this movie that were great, and sometimes that alone can make the movie really rewatchable. There's the scene at the beginning where Aquaman's mother has to defend her husband and her baby from the attacking, I don't even know what those people were, but they were sent from Atlantis to come bring her back. And it's all shot in this beautiful one take. That made me in the theater go, wow, that was awesome. When I first saw Jason Momoa as Aquaman in Justice League, I really didn't think I was going to like him. But to be honest, he really started to win me over in this movie because he plays the perfect line between conflicted and carefree. You've got great performances by Willem Dafoe. I mean, he didn't have much screen time, but I still enjoyed seeing him in this fictional world, specifically as someone who lives in Atlantis. I thought that was pretty cool. And what was the guy who played Aquaman's brother? Let me look it up real quick because I totally forgot. Patrick Wilson. Patrick Wilson did amazing. And I believe he was Ocean Master. Ocean Master is a perfect example of how you can take a really corny character from the comic books and make him into a actual threat, which was awesome. So I thought that their dynamic was really great. Although the CGI was shoddy at times, it was head and shoulders better than 1984. So to me personally, that's why I think that this is why it's a cut above mediocre and forgettable. Really trying to dance around this subject, but there's no sense in pushing it off. Even before the whole Amber Heard news broke about the situation with her and Johnny Depp, I never liked Amber Heard as Mara. I thought she was emotionless. I thought she had no chemistry with Jason Momoa. I was glad to know that even the DC executives agreed with me on that, and they really wanted to get rid of her by the second movie, but they weren't able to. And I personally did not like her at all as this love interest. It 100% felt we're gonna throw Mara into this and force them to like each other, and then it leads into just some forced scenes at the end where they kiss, or when they're trying to exchange loving glances at each other. It just looks awkward and it looks forced. So that is what probably knocks it down from the pretty great. Moving on to Birds of Prey. I would put this straight into the mediocre and forgettable. A lot of people like this movie, and to those people, I say I'm happy that you enjoyed it. I was extremely excited to see Ewan McGregor play a villain, specifically Black Mask. I played a lot of the Arkham games growing up, and having him in Arkham Origins was awesome. I didn't really like the whole bait and switch thing with bringing in the Joker as the Black Mask, but that's a whole other story for a whole nother time. But I feel like Black Mask in this movie, ironically, was one of my biggest problems. Ewan McGregor really tried to play the campy, over-the-top misogynist, and to me, it didn't really hit as well, because we see certain parts of the movie where he's very menacing and very mob boss-esque, which is more so of what Black Mask actually is in the comics. But overall, I feel like he felt a little too one note. Margot Robbie played Harley Quinn phenomenally. I mean, she's been great in every single live action version of Harley Quinn, but I feel like this movie was a movie that really didn't need to be made. I feel like there's really nowhere we went with the story that felt impactful. And it just goes to show that the studio really just kind of put this out to see if it would get money. And when it didn't get money, they kind of freaked out and just kind of forgot about it. So I would put that in the mediocre and forgettable category. Coming up next, we have Batman v Superman, but the deluxe edition. Now, this is something that some people would say, oh, why would you put this on the list? It's technically Batman v Superman. I would highly debate you on that one. So while I'm talking, I'm going to put this up here in the pretty great category. This movie is so much better than the theatrical version. They add in a lot more extra scenes. They spend more time with these characters to give them just a tad bit more development, because that's literally my biggest problem with Batman v Superman, is that we didn't get enough development beforehand. And granted, it's still the same movie. There's still a lot of the same flaws, but it gives you a little bit more time to spend with these characters to get more invested in them. My first thought after watching it was, why wasn't this just the original one? Now, granted, they probably had to change the rating, and it probably wouldn't have made as much money if they just went straight for this one, but this to me is the superior version, and I would say that I thoroughly enjoyed this one, so I'm gonna put that in pretty great. All right, moving on to Shazam. Easily was pretty great. I went to go see this with my wife, and I think that was one of the most fun theater experiences we had. It was just a very light setting. You could tell everybody was just enjoying themselves, laughing, having a good time. This movie was just a blast. Zachary Levi as Shazam is A+ casting. A+ casting. I feel like we're not talking about that enough. I like the fact that they went along with that unique story beat of the orphan who, or in this case, he wasn't really an orphan, he just didn't know yet that his mom had abandoned him, but the kid who's lost his mother gets brought into a foster home and learns again how to love and deal with loss, and when he becomes reunited with his mother, to find out she genuinely didn't want him because she couldn't take care of him. And the fact that they actually deal with this and give you moments to really settle into what he's feeling and get inside of Billy's head, I thought that was awesome. There's too many movies these days where especially when you're dealing with a more comedy focused movie, you sacrifice serious story beats to insert a joke. And trust me, there's plenty of jokes in Shazam, but when it needs to be serious, it does. Now, granted, there's a lot of tonal inconsistencies in this. I know the director had some previous roots in horror, and so there's random horror scenes out of nowhere that are extremely violent and extremely dark, where you've got executives on the 20th floor of a building getting eaten by these 7 deadly sins, and it's extremely graphic and just surprising. And I feel sorry for any parents who weren't expecting that when they brought their kids in to see the movie in theaters. But man, I mean, granted, it was still entertaining, but I was very surprised. It seemed very jarring. But to me, there's really not a lot of problems I had with this movie. I had a genuinely fun time from start to finish, and I did not see that plot twist coming at the end where Shazam gives his powers to his extended family, basically, his adopted family. I don't know how I didn't see that coming, but it was so awesome to see the Shazam family all team up together and all get powers to defeat the 7 deadly sins. I thought that was awesome. I thought that was really, really cool. So to me, when I think of Shazam, I think of a great time. Man of Steel. Man of Steel was the trailblazing movie for the DCEU. Again, directed by Zack Snyder. While I'm talking, I'm going to throw this up into pretty great. Again, I think this movie is definitely overhated. I think now people are starting to come around to it and they're starting to enjoy it a lot more. But at its time, I feel like people really didn't appreciate Zack Snyder's vision. Because again, Zack Snyder takes pre-established characters and kind of inserts his own vision into them. And in this case, it made Superman a lot more dark. It made him a lot more realistic. It made the world around him more gritty. This was a very grounded version of Superman. You get to see his story told in a way where you can really sympathize with him and see his turmoil of, why am I here? You know, why do I have powers if I can't use them? I thought the CGI was awesome. Again, in a world full of lazy effects, I feel like this perfectly encapsulated what it feels like to be Superman. Seeing him fly through the sky, testing out his powers, was one of the best scenes in the DCEU. And honestly, Hans Zimmer's score in that scene gives me chills every time I watch it. I literally downloaded the track to my phone as soon as I heard it. I thought the villain was really good. I thought Zod was awesome. And I know the decision at the end was super controversial, and I still agree with all of the other detractors, is why didn't he just point Zod's head somewhere else instead of snapping his neck? But I'm thinking that maybe Zack Snyder's vision was, maybe if you were in Superman's shoes and you potentially didn't think to do anything else other than that, and you thought that was your only choice, wouldn't you have made that same decision too? It showed that he made a judgment call, and that judgment call haunted him. And again, I don't have too much to say about this movie that's negative. The only thing that takes it from it being this is cinema is the fact that it did seem a little slow, a little plotting at time to time. That's literally the only thing keeping it away from this is cinema for me. All right, we're almost there. Looks like we've got Wonder Woman 2017. This one's gonna be tough because when I first watched it, I thought it was amazing. I thought it was phenomenal. But after going back and watching it several times, I would say decent and watchable. I think this is a perfect example of a movie that was really bogged down by its third act. If they would have really kept driving home the story beats that they were presenting in acts 1 and 2 of Diana finding her place and learning how to understand that human beings are warring with each other, and she needs to be a symbol of hope and a protector for them. Gal Gadot in this is wonderful. No pun intended. I thought her love story with Chris Pine was really well done. You start to see them kind of understand each other's perspective, and yeah, they didn't agree on everything, but at the end they could finally come together over their love. And I think that showed Diana how to love others, is through the love that Chris Pine showed her. I keep calling him by the actor's name, but his name's Steve, by the way. But man, this third act really torpedoes the movie in my opinion, because you have this awesome plot twist where she thinks she's done the right thing, and she thinks that she's killed Ares, only to find out that that wasn't Ares. And then the other guy who is kind of lurking in the shadows early in the movie comes forward and is like, I'm Ares. Kind of reminds me of General Hux from The Last Jedi. Not The Last Jedi, The Rise of Skywalker, where he just is over here like, I'm the spy. It just felt very forced. And I think it was because the studio may have put a little like sticky note on Patty Jenkins' desk. It was like, hey, make sure you put a big CGI battle at the end. And so she's like, all right, let me see what I can do. Because this last act really felt like the classic bad guy in a CGI suit fights a CGI hero. It was very predictable, very boring, and it made me just kind of scratch my head and go, where was the good movie? What happened? Because it doesn't make the movie terrible at all, but I think that's what knocks it down from pretty great to being decent and watchable, because once that third act hits, you've seen it all before. So I made a 1000 IQ move, and after I finished recording this, I realized that I totally forgot about Zack Snyder's Justice League, the Snyder Cut. Literally one of the most important parts of the DCEU. So my first thought was, oh crap, what am I gonna do? And my second thought was, I'm not recording it tonight because I'm tired. So giving you guys some full transparency, this is the day after I recorded this video, and I'm just wearing the same shirt. So nailed it. So coming back to the ranking video, I have Justice League and Peacemaker left, but jumping right into where I would put Justice League, I would put the Snyder Cut in pretty great. Because to me, this is probably just a hair away from being pure cinema. I thoroughly enjoyed this when it first came out. When I got the news that Zack Snyder was going to be giving the fans the opportunity to experience this, I was so excited. Regardless of how it turned out, I think what it represents is more important than what was actually going to be in it, because it showed that the studios were finally willing to give him the full control he wanted, even though it was going to be just a spinoff. I'm so glad that they gave him the green light to just do whatever the heck he wanted. And oh my gosh, it was a 4-hour spectacle. Absolutely loved it. I love the creative choices that he decided to make throughout the whole movie. The CGI was so much better than what we got in the original Justice League. And to me, this is the definitive Justice League. This is what we should have had since the beginning. But again, with all of the unfortunate circumstances that I mentioned in my Downfall of DC video, with the passing of Zack Snyder's daughter, studio interference, just the whole 9 yards, it led to the travesty that is the original Justice League. But man, the characters in this movie feel so much more fleshed out. I mean, Cyborg had one of the worst arcs in the original Justice League, but in the Snyder Cut, oh my gosh, we finally get to see his backstory and we can really invest in his character. And Ray Fisher does a great job with what he's given. Even though this is just one movie, we spent enough time with him, with Cyborg, to get emotionally invested in his arc. I thought The Flash was fantastic, and that scene at the end of him turning back time gives me chills every time I watch it. Do I like Ezra Miller as The Flash? No. But I thought that his portrayal in this was awesome, and I thought that final scene was A+. What knocks it down for me from cinema is the fact that it is a 4-hour movie. The rewatchability of this goes down significantly the more you watch it, because I find with my busy schedule, it really is hard to find 4 hours of my time to sit down and watch it. Because heck, even if I split it up into 2, that's 2 hours that I could be doing other things or watching other things. So the rewatchability for me doesn't quite work. But when it comes to the movie itself, I have absolutely no problems with it. Thoroughly enjoyed it. I recommend this to anyone who is even trying to get into DC. And the fact that this could have been part 1 of potentially a part 3, or part 1 of a 3-part series of the Justice League. I'm so disappointed that we couldn't get that in the future, and Warner Brothers decided to shut it down completely. I really feel like we 100% were robbed. I'm not one of those Snyder fans that's campaigning on Twitter every day to bring this back, but honestly, if they announced in the next couple years that they were going to bring back the Snyderverse, basically, I'm all for it. Let's do it, because this movie itself was what sold me on Snyder's vision, and it's a shame that we didn't get the full scope of what Snyder wanted to do. Coming to our last, not last in the ranking, but last on the list, is Peacemaker. I think this is the only TV show that the DCEU has put out. Could be wrong, just like how I was with forgetting Snyder Cut, but it is what it is. Peacemaker, I am going to put in This Is Cinema. I don't know what you guys want from me. Peacemaker was awesome. In the Disneyified? In the Disneyified shows that we've had recently, I've left wanting every single time. I feel like they've all been kind of hollow and lifeless. Peacemaker has everything you'd want in an entertaining TV show. It's ironic that both of James Gunn's projects are both in my This Is Cinema, but I think James Gunn is one of the best in the game when it comes to directing misfits and adding humor, but yet also not forgetting character development. I had my doubts about John Cena when they first announced that he would be returning as Peacemaker, but he silences every single doubt I had going into this. His ability to show a wide array of emotions, almost said motions, taking a character who a lot of people didn't like in the Suicide Squad and making him such a likable, flawed, but yet sincere human being in Peacemaker. I mean, James Gunn is just incredible. I mean, give this man as many projects as you can, because when the studio gives him as much control as possible and lets him work his magic, good things happen almost every single time. I thought that the cast of characters around him did pretty well. I definitely think that there was some cheesiness and corniness throughout the whole show, but I mean, when it's done so well that you're willing to overlook that, that to me is proof positive that you got yourself a winner. And man, the steal of the show, the absolute star of the show, was Freddie Stroma as Vigilante. This dude was non-stop funny from the moment he was on screen. I totally didn't know who Vigilante was, and then I had to actually go look him up online and do some research in the comics to find out where he came from. And man, for a guy who a lot of people were calling a Deadpool ripoff, I don't care, because my thing is I love Deadpool, and anytime you throw me basically like a Dollar Tree Deadpool, I'm gonna eat it up, because I love Vigilante's character in this show. He is comic relief, but he bounces off of Peacemaker in such a great way that just leaves you riveted every single time. I thought the jokes that he had were snappy and quick, and I keep coming back to Deadpool, but that's what I think of. I thought that the villain of the arc, which in this case was these weird bugs, I thought it so zany and bizarre that only James Gunn could pull it off. And to have such an awesome, fleshed out character to me is just awesome. It's just incredible. Shoot, before I forget, I cannot go through this whole thing without mentioning the intro. Oh my gosh. The intro for Peacemaker, you know, like the opening credits and stuff for the TV show. I don't know whose idea it was to use Wigwam's Do You Want to Taste It, but that choice for the music and the bizarre dance they do every single time, yeah, it's impossible to skip it, because you know sometimes you just want to skip at the intro of a TV show because you know what's coming. I never skipped it throughout the whole season. It was just so funny and entertaining and engaging. Again, kudos to the entire crew, because to me that was just a fun time where you can just turn your brain off and enjoy a funny, heartfelt TV show. So yeah, that's my ranking. Guys, let me know what you thought of this ranking. If you want to see more tiers in the future, if you want me to do something like ranking all of the Marvel movies, granted it would be a much longer video, so I'd really have to see if you guys would actually be down for that kind of thing. But I'm down with anything. I definitely enjoyed putting this tier together. I would love to make more, but it's really going to come down to what you guys think. That being said, I'm going to turn it over to you guys. Let me know in the comments below. Instead of asking you what your favorite DCEU movie is, I'm going to ask you what your least favorite DCEU movie is. A lot of people have their opinions, and this is what this platform is all about, is I want to hear what you guys think. With that being said, I want to thank you guys so much for watching. Drop a like if you enjoyed this video, subscribe if you're new, and guys, thank you so much. I'll see you next time.